The air hung thick with the scent of iron and death as Jerusalem burned in the summer of 1099. Blood, deep crimson and still warm, pooled between ancient stones, splashing up to the knees of war horses as they trampled through the carnage. Hooves squished through human remains while screams of agony and terror echoed off the city's holy walls. July 4th, a date that would resonate through centuries, and the holiest city on earth had become a slaughterhouse. But what they don't teach you in school is how this bloodbath would give birth to two secret brotherhoods that would control kings, create the first international banking system, and survive almost 1,000 years. One would be tortured and burned alive in the most shocking betrayal in history. The other still operates today, right under your nose. You think you know about power? You know nothing. These weren't the shining knights of Hollywood movies. They were ordinary men who discovered something that terrified every king in Europe. Something so powerful that one order had to be completely destroyed to keep their secrets buried. Something so valuable that the other order is still protecting it today. What did they find beneath Jerusalem? Why did 9 poor knights become richer than entire kingdoms in just 20 years? How did warrior monks create a banking system that modern banks still use? And why does one organization founded in 1023 still have its own country, issues its own passports, and meets with world leaders today? Picture yourself standing in Jerusalem before the Crusaders arrived. It's 1023 and there's already a hospital here, a Christian hospital operating under Muslim rule. Sounds impossible? It happened. And the man who made it happen will blow your mind. His name was Gerard. That's all we know. No last name, no family history. This mysterious figure somehow convinced Muslim rulers to let Christians run a hospital in their most sacred city. Think about that. In an age of religious war, he built bridges. In a time of hatred, he created healing. Walk into Gerard's hospital. Cool air hits your face after the burning Jerusalem heat. You smell herbs and incense mixing with hope and desperation. Soft prayers blend with groans of pain, and the gentle splash of water being poured for the dying. Simple beds line limestone walls where exhausted pilgrims rest after journeys that killed half their companions. Here's the part that will shock you. Gerard was running this hospital when the Crusaders arrived, and somehow kept it operating through the bloodiest conquest in medieval history. While soldiers were riding through pools of blood outside, Gerard was inside, saving lives. Muslim lives, Christian lives, Jewish lives, anyone who needed help. Legend says Gerard threw bread to starving crusaders from the city walls during the siege. When Muslim guards checked his baskets, the bread magically turned to stones. Real magic? Probably not. But people believed it. And sometimes belief is more powerful than reality. When the slaughter ended and Jerusalem fell, Gerard's hospital didn't just survive. It exploded in size. Why? Because suddenly, everyone wanted to visit the Holy Land. And guess what? The roads were death traps. You want to know what real courage looks like? February 15, 1113, Pope Pascal II officially recognized Gerard's community as a religious order. The Hospitallers were born. But here's what's insane. Gerard created rules that completely flipped medieval society upside down. Listen to this. He declared that sick people owned the order. The brothers called sick people our lords, and themselves servants and slaves. In a world where nobles owned peasants, Gerard made his knights serve the poorest of the poor. Revolutionary? That's an understatement. But Gerard didn't live to see what happened next. When he died around 1120, a man named Raymond Dupuy took over. And Raymond would make a decision that changed everything. He would teach these healers to kill. Why would an order founded on healing take up the sword? Because the roads to Jerusalem had become hunting grounds for bandits who made pilgrims disappear forever. Picture yourself on the road from Jaffa to Jerusalem. Narrow path winding through rocky hills, perfect for ambushes. You hear nervous whispers as pilgrims clutch their walking sticks tighter. Stones shift above you. Shadows move in olive groves. Your heart pounds because you know one wrong turn and you're dead. Small groups of unarmed pilgrims made easy targets. Many arrived at Gerard's hospital, robbed, wounded, or traumatized. If they arrived at all, something had to be done. Enter a French knight named Hugues de Payens, 1118 or 1119. He approached King Baldwin II with an idea so crazy it just might work. He and 8 companions would form a religious brotherhood dedicated to protecting pilgrims. They'd become something the world had never seen: warrior monks. Think about how radical this was. Knights killed people. Monks saved souls. Hugues wanted to do both. At the same time, King Baldwin said yes, and history exploded. Baldwin gave them quarters on the Temple Mount, in part of his palace built inside the captured Al-Aqsa Mosque. This location, believed to sit on the ruins of Solomon's Temple, gave them their name: the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, the Knights Templar. Want to know how poor they really were? Their early seals showed 2 knights riding 1 horse, not because they were brothers in arms, because they couldn't afford 2 horses. For almost 10 years, nothing happened. 9 knights protecting pilgrims on dangerous roads, receiving few donations, attracting few recruits. They seemed destined for obscurity. Then, everything changed. Bernard of Clairvaux, influential monk, most powerful religious figure in Europe, and André de Montbard's uncle. André was one of the 9 founding Templars. Suddenly, Bernard saw these warrior monks as the solution to a problem that had plagued Christianity for centuries. How do you reconcile Christ's message of peace with the violence of knighthood? Bernard's answer: make violence holy. Around 1129, he wrote, in praise of the new knighthood. His words transformed everything. Regular knights fought for earthly glory. Templars fought for God. Regular knights feared death. Templars welcomed it as martyrdom. January 1129, Council of Troyes. The Catholic Church officially recognized the Templars. Suddenly, these 9 unknown knights had papal backing. Money poured in from across Europe. Nobles donated land, gold, and their younger sons. But joining meant giving up everything. Personal wealth gone, family ties severed, individual will surrendered. Templars wore plain white robes, cut their hair, grew beards, ate in silence, and prepared constantly for death. What would you sacrifice for absolute purpose? These men sacrificed everything. Now here's where it gets interesting. By the 1130s, both orders had found their identity, but they were evolving in ways that would determine their fate. The Hospitallers embraced a dual mission: morning, changing bandages and feeding the sick; afternoon, mounted on war horses with swords drawn, patrolling dangerous roads. The clatter of armor falling silent as they entered hospitals, the whisper of robes replacing the clash of steel. This duality became their strength. The Templars exploded in growth after papal recognition. Bernard of Clairvaux's endorsement made them Christianity's favorite charity. But here's what will shock you. Despite their warrior image, most Templars never saw combat in the Holy Land. Thousands worked as administrators, farmers, and financial managers across Europe. The military wing, just a fraction of their total membership. 1139. Pope Innocent II gave Templars extraordinary privileges: no church taxes, free passage through all borders, answerable only to the Pope. They became the first truly international organization in history. Both orders developed sophisticated structures: Grand Masters elected for life, provincial commanders, local preceptories, 3 classes of membership, knights from noble families, sergeants from commoner backgrounds, and chaplains who were ordained priests. The Hospitallers did something revolutionary. They formally included women. The Sisters of the Order of St. John served primarily in hospitals, but they were full members with voting rights, centuries before women's liberation. By the mid-1200s, both orders had become military powerhouses and economic giants. They built massive castles throughout the Holy Land. They became essential to Crusader defense. But they were developing specialties that would shape their destinies in ways no one could predict. And then the first great test came. 1147, the Second Crusade. Emperor Conrad III of Germany and King Louis VII of France had assembled massive armies to recapture Edessa, the first Crusader state to fall to Muslim forces. Both military orders joined this expedition, their first major crusading campaign since their founding. What followed was one of the most catastrophic military disasters in Crusader history. Picture the German army crossing Anatolia, 40,000 men, including seasoned Templar and Hospitaller Knights, marching through hostile territory. The Turks avoided direct battle, instead harassing the column with hit-and-run attacks, arrows whistling from rocky outcrops. Sudden charges that melted away before the heavy cavalry could respond. The constant fear of ambush wearing down even veteran warriors. At Dorylaeum, the same site where the First Crusade had won a famous victory, the Turks surrounded Conrad's forces. The German emperor himself was wounded, his army was destroyed. Survivors, including the military orders, limped back to Constantinople, having achieved nothing but massive casualties. The French army suffered an even worse fate in the mountains of Anatolia. King Louis VII's forces were virtually annihilated. Only the disciplined fighting retreat organized by the Templars saved the king's life. Night after night they fell back, protecting the royal retreat, their white mantles stained with blood and mud. But the real disaster came at Damascus in 1148. The surviving Crusader forces, reinforced by troops from the Kingdom of Jerusalem, decided to attack Damascus. It seemed logical. Damascus was the weakest of the Muslim strongholds, and capturing it would secure the Crusader states' eastern flank. What they didn't know was that they were walking into a trap that would haunt both military orders for decades. Listen to the sound of 50,000 Christian warriors approaching Damascus's walls. The thunder of hooves, the clanking of armor, the flutter of hundreds of banners in the desert wind. Templars and Hospitallers rode at the vanguard. Their combat experience from defending pilgrim routes made them the army's elite strike force. The initial assault went perfectly. The orchards outside Damascus fell quickly. Muslim defenders retreated toward the city walls. Victory seemed certain. Then politics destroyed everything. The local Crusader barons, jealous of any success by the European newcomers, convinced the army to shift its attack to a different section of the walls. Why? Because they didn't want the Europeans to claim credit for capturing the city. This new position was much stronger, with no cover for the attackers. As the army repositioned, Muslim reinforcements arrived. Suddenly, the besiegers became the besieged. Saladin's uncle, Shirkuh, had brought a massive relief force. The Crusaders found themselves trapped between Damascus's walls and a fresh enemy army. The retreat became a rout. The military orders, which had performed brilliantly in the fighting, now faced the humiliation of covering another Christian disaster. Templar and Hospitaller Knights formed the rear guard, dying by dozens to save an army that had snatched defeat from the jaws of victory through pure stupidity. Young Templar Knights who had dreamed of glory in the Holy Land instead experienced their first bitter taste of how political infighting could destroy military success. The lesson would shape both orders' future policies. Never again would they trust secular leaders to make battlefield decisions. The Second Crusade's failure taught both orders crucial lessons about warfare, politics, and survival that would serve them well in the trials ahead. But it also marked them as the most reliable military forces in the Crusader states, the only ones who could be trusted to fight effectively regardless of political chaos. And they would need every lesson they'd learned for what was coming next. July 4th, 1187. The morning began with deadly stillness. Twin hills called the Horns of Hattin. The sun hadn't risen, but armor was already burning hot. White-robed Templars and black-robed Hospitallers shifted nervously in their saddles, red and white crosses like targets in the growing light. Water supplies are critically low, a scout reported to King Guy of Jerusalem, voice cracking with thirst. Saladin controls all access to the Sea of Galilee, but Gerard de Riedfor, Templar Grand Master, dismissed the concern. "We fight now. Our men are Christianity's finest warriors." The Hospitallers had opposed this march. Too dangerous, too risky. Now they were trapped with the Templars in Saladin's carefully planned death trap. Facing them was Saladin, the Muslim genius who had united Egypt and Syria. He had deliberately drawn Christian forces away from water in blazing summer heat. As battle erupted, disciplined Muslim cavalry executed perfect crescent formations surrounding Christian flanks, while mounted archers rained death on increasingly desperate crusaders. Feel the weight of that sun beating down on metal helmets, already unbearable in morning light. Taste the dust and blood filling Christian mouths as they fought with growing desperation. Hear the thunderous hooves interrupted by screams of wounded men and horses. By midday, hell had come to earth. Saladin's troops set fire to dry brush surrounding the Christian army. Black smoke choked already thirsty crusaders. Heat became unbearable in heavy armor. Distinctive banners of military orders began falling one by one. Crackling flames and billowing smoke created hellish conditions. By afternoon, battle became slaughter. Hospitallers and Templars fought to the last man, but most were killed or captured. Among the captured Templars was a young knight who had recently arrived from France. He had dreamed of glory in the Holy Land. Now kneeling in dust with his brothers, he faced a choice that would define his final moments. Saladin offered captured Templars and Hospitallers a choice: convert to Islam or die. Almost every single man chose death. They were beheaded on the spot. The young knight, watching brothers die one by one, reportedly sang hymns until the sword fell on his neck. Would you have that courage to choose death over abandoning your deepest beliefs? These men did by the hundreds. Hatton was catastrophic for Crusader states. Jerusalem fell to Saladin shortly after. Most Christian territories were lost, but both military orders survived and played crucial roles in attempts to reclaim these lands. The Siege of Acre lasted nearly 2 years, from August 1189 to July 1191, the most brutal warfare imaginable. Military orders maintained positions outside city walls through blazing summers and bone-chilling winters. Disease claimed more lives than enemy weapons. From their camp, Templars could see Acre's massive walls rising above the Mediterranean. The constant crashes of waves provided a rhythmic backdrop to their daily struggle. Their siege towers, built from ships' timbers, were repeatedly burned by Greek fire. Terrifying sights of unstoppable liquid flame cascading down wooden structures. Inside hospital compounds, knights doubled as doctors, treating wounds, fighting dysentery that destroyed their ranks. "We lose 3 men to disease for every one to Muslim arrows," one commander observed, moving among beds of groaning soldiers. When Acre finally fell in July 1191, military orders were first to enter. Their banners, tattered from 2 years of constant exposure, were raised triumphantly over captured walls. Both orders built impressive fortifications throughout the Holy Land. The Hospitallers' Crac des Chevaliers in Syria became one of the most formidable Crusader fortresses ever built. Stand on Crac des Chevaliers, massive walls, feel cool mountain breeze cutting through Syrian heat. See for miles in every direction. No army could approach unseen. Constant tap of stonemasons, hammers echoing through courtyards as Hospitallers continually strengthened defenses. In inner courtyards, knights trained with sword and spear, clash of practice weapons creating martial symphony. The Templar Chateau Pellerin was a massive coastal fortress with walls 13 feet thick and towers rising 100 feet above the sea. Constant crash of Mediterranean waves against rocky foundations provided rhythmic backdrop to defenders' daily lives. These weren't just military installations. They were administrative centers controlling territories and protecting trade routes. The height of medieval military architecture, incorporating lessons from Byzantine and Muslim defensive designs. But the golden age of Crusader power was ending, and the next disaster would shake both orders to their foundations. October 17, 1244. La Forbie, a name that still makes historians shudder. The largest Crusader army assembled since the First Crusade marched across the Palestinian plain toward Gaza. 16,000 infantry, 100 heavy cavalry. The flower of Crusader nobility, the grand masters of both the temple and hospital riding at the head of their knights. What could go wrong with such overwhelming force? Everything. The enemy they faced wasn't just any Muslim army. It was the Khwarezmian Turks. Nomadic warriors so savage that even other Muslims feared them. They'd been displaced from their homeland by Mongol invasions and were now rampaging through the Middle East like a plague of locusts. These weren't civilized enemies who followed rules of war. They were destroyers who took no prisoners and showed no mercy. The Crusader army was confident, too confident. They'd beaten Muslim forces before. They had superior armor, better training, divine favor. What could possibly defeat them? Picture the moment when the two armies met. 16,000 Christians facing 20,000 Khwarezmian Turks backed by Egyptian reinforcements. The morning sun glinting off Christian armor and Muslim scimitars. The thunder of hooves as heavy cavalry prepared to charge. Then came the sound that would haunt survivors. Nightmares forever. The Khwarezmian war cry. Not the disciplined shouts of Saladin's Syrians or the organized battle cries of Egyptian Mamluks. This was something primal. The howl of wolves who tasted blood and wanted more. The Khwarezmian charge hit the Crusader lines like a natural disaster. These weren't knights following codes of chivalry. They were killers who'd learned warfare in the steppes where only the most savage survived. They surrounded the Crusader flanks, divided their army, and then methodically destroyed each separated group. The Templars tried to break through the enemy center. Their disciplined charge initially scattered the Muslim infantry, but the Khwarezmians had learned from decades fighting Mongols. They gave ground, let the knights exhaust themselves, then closed in from all sides. Grandmaster Armand de Périgord of the Temple fell with most of his knights. Grandmaster Guillaume de Châteauneuf of the hospital died fighting beside him. The cream of both orders was destroyed in a single afternoon. But here's the most horrifying part. When the battle ended, the Khwarezmians didn't take prisoners or demand ransoms like civilized armies. They killed everyone. 16,000 Christians died at La Fourby. Only 33 Templars survived out of nearly 300. The Hospitallers lost even more. Think about that. In one battle, both orders lost more knights than in all their previous battles combined. The survivors faced a terrible choice: abandon the Holy Land or rebuild from almost nothing. They chose to rebuild. But La Fourby had broken something fundamental. The military orders were no longer the unstoppable force they had once been. They were mortal, vulnerable, and their enemies knew it. The defeat at La Fourby marked the beginning of the end for the Crusader states. Without the military orders at full strength, the remaining Christian territories became increasingly isolated outposts in a hostile Muslim world. And the final blow was coming. 1291, the fall of Acre, the last major Crusader stronghold facing an overwhelming Muslim army, Templars and Hospitallers among the final defenders. Picture the chaos in Acre's final hours. Thunderous crash of siege engines pounding walls, screams of civilians rushing toward harbor, sharp smell of smoke from burning buildings. In Templar compound, knights making the last stand as headquarters literally collapsed around them, burying defenders and attackers together. Many died defending the city. Others helped evacuate civilians by sea before the city fell. With Acre's loss, Crusader presence in Holy Land ended after nearly 2 centuries. Both Templars and Hospitallers forced to relocate. Templars to Cyprus, Hospitallers first to Cyprus, later to Rhodes. This moment marked crucial divergence in their paths. One would lead to a new island fortress and centuries of continued service, the other to fire and infamy. As ships carrying surviving knights sailed from smoking ruins of Acre, none could predict how differently their orders would fare. One brother order was about to make the greatest mistake in medieval history. The other was about to make the smartest decision. But first, you need to understand what made the Templars so dangerous. What they discovered that terrified every king in Europe. What innovation they created that modern banks still use today. Ever wonder why you can use a credit card anywhere in the world? Thank the Knights Templar. They created the first international banking network in history, and it made them so powerful the kings trembled at their name. Templars didn't start as bankers. They started as pilgrim protectors, but protecting pilgrims revealed a massive problem: How do you carry months of travel money without getting robbed and killed? Picture yourself as a medieval pilgrim. You need funds for months of travel, food, accommodation, but carrying large sums makes you a target for every bandit between here and Jerusalem. You're dead meat with money, useless without it. Templars created a brilliant solution. Deposit funds at a Templar house in your home country. Withdraw equivalent funds in the Holy Land. Simple and revolutionary. Step inside a Templar preceptory in 12th century France. Stone walls thick as fortress walls, narrow windows, more bank vault than church. Scent of beeswax candles mixing with parchment and ink. A nobleman approaches the Templar treasurer, a knight whose military career ended with wounds from Holy Land service. The nobleman carries a heavy purse of silver coins, metallic clinks echoing in a vaulted chamber as coins get counted. After careful documentation, the treasurer provides an encoded letter with secret symbols and seals. Months later in Jerusalem, this letter allows withdrawal of the equivalent sum without risking wealth across thousands of dangerous miles. This was revolutionary for medieval Europe. Templars created essentially a private banking network spanning Europe and Middle East. Major financial centers in Paris, London, and Jerusalem. Satellite branches throughout Christianity. Consider William Marshall, one of England's greatest knights. He entrusted his vast wealth to Templars before departing on crusade. When he returned years later, every penny awaited him. This level of security was almost unheard of in medieval finance. This trust became foundation of Templar financial success. Meanwhile, their brother order was making equally revolutionary advances in a completely different field. While Templars revolutionized medieval finance, Hospitallers made equally important contributions in healthcare. Their very name reflected original purpose: provide hospitality and medical care to pilgrims in Holy Land. This medical mission remained central even as they evolved into powerful military order. The Hospitallers' flagship institution was their hospital in Jerusalem, famous throughout the medieval world. Step inside this remarkable facility. Unlike dark, cramped spaces common in medieval Europe, hospital wards were spacious and well-ventilated. Tall windows allowing fresh air and light. Clever systems of water channels providing clean water for washing patients and flushing waste. Air-carrying scents of herbs and spices used in treatments: rosemary, thyme, cinnamon, and pepper. Patients lay on individual beds, not crowded on straw mats. They were served meals on silver plates, not just for prestige, but because the wealthy could afford better materials that stayed cleaner. Food carefully prepared according to patients' conditions, reflecting Hospitallers' understanding of nutrition's role in healing. Moving through wards were diverse hospital staff, setting Hospitallers apart from other medieval medical providers. Unlike hospitals relying on untrained monks or nuns, Hospitallers employed professional physicians and surgeons. They recruited medical practitioners from various backgrounds: Christians, Jews, and Muslims, valuing medical expertise over religious affiliation. Consider a Muslim physician from Damascus who found himself treating a crusader in a hospital ward after being captured in battle. Initially expecting execution or imprisonment, he was offered a position when his medical skills became apparent. For years, he worked alongside Christian caregivers, teaching Arabic medical techniques while learning European approaches. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Because while one order was perfecting the art of saving lives, forces were gathering that would destroy the other completely. What determines whether an organization survives or perishes when its original purpose becomes obsolete? By end of 13th century, both Templars and Hospitallers stood at crossroads. The Holy Land was lost. Original purpose seemingly finished. How they responded would determine whether they flourished or faded into history. The fall of Acre in 1291 marked the end of the Crusader states and forced both military orders to reinvent themselves. Initially, both retreated to Cyprus, but their paths would soon split dramatically. Templars struggled to redefine their purpose. Original missions of protecting pilgrims were no longer viable. While they maintained banking activities and administered extensive European properties, they lacked compelling new military mission, justifying their continued existence as warrior brotherhood. Jacques de Molay, elected Templar Grand Master in 1292, advocated a new crusade to recapture the Holy Land. He found little support among European monarchs, exhausted by 2 centuries of costly, unsuccessful crusading. Templars became increasingly isolated and defensive, aware of growing criticism but unable to counter it effectively. Picture aging de Molay in Templar headquarters in Cyprus, poring over maps of lost Holy Land by candlelight. The scratching of quill on parchment and occasional sigh are the only sounds as he drafts yet another appeal for a new crusade. Outside, younger knights grow restless, training for war that seems increasingly unlikely. Meanwhile, Hospitallers actively charted a new course. Under leadership of Grand Masters Guillaume de Villaret and Fouque de Villaret, they set sights on the island of Rhodes, then part of Byzantine Empire, but vulnerable to conquest. Between 1306 and 1310, Hospitallers conducted a campaign to capture Rhodes and the islands. By 1310, they'd secured control and established Rhodes as the new headquarters. The Pope confirmed their possession, and Knights Hospitaller became known as Knights of Rhodes. On Rhodes, Hospitallers created a sovereign state with its own government currency and foreign policy. They transformed the island's capital into a formidable fortress city, building massive walls, towers, and a grand palace for the Grand Master. The constant ring of hammers and chisels as stonemasons shaped limestone blocks, forming a new stronghold. They also constructed a large hospital, continuing the medical mission alongside military activities. The Knights of Rhodes developed a powerful navy, patrolling the eastern Mediterranean, protecting Christian shipping, and conducting operations against Muslim vessels. Then came 1480. Sultan Mehmed II, fresh from conquering Constantinople, launched a major siege with approximately 70,000 troops. The summer brought an ominous sight to Rhodes' shores, the largest Ottoman fleet ever assembled against the island, carrying 70,000 troops under command of Mesih Pasha, the general handpicked by Sultan Mehmed. Inside the massive walls of Rhodes town, Grand Master Pierre d'Aubusson had prepared meticulously. Food and water stockpiled, walls reinforced, every able-bodied man assigned a position. The distinctive architecture of Hospitaller fortifications, innovative angled bastions designed to create overlapping fields of fire, would face its greatest test. They will come at the weakest point, near the Jewish quarter, d'Aubusson predicted, studying the terrain from the highest tower of the Grand Master's palace. Constant pounding of Ottoman cannons soon confirmed his assessment. The ground literally shook beneath the defenders' feet as Ottoman miners tunneled under walls, packing tunnels with barrels of black powder. When these exploded, sections of massive walls collapsed in clouds of dust and rubble. Through these breaches poured waves of Ottoman troops, battle cries echoing off remaining fortifications. In one such assault, d'Aubusson himself led a counterattack, armor-dented and blood-spattered. "Stand fast for Christ and St. John," he shouted, rallying knights despite receiving 3 serious wounds. After 2 months of continuous assault, Ottoman forces withdrew, leaving behind thousands of dead. As the last enemy ships disappeared over the horizon, the exhausted defenders could scarcely believe they'd prevailed against such overwhelming odds. The Hospitallers' successful defense of Rhodes in 1480 was one of their greatest military achievements and enhanced their reputation throughout Europe. However, it also confirmed Rhodes as priority target for future Ottoman campaigns. By early 1500s, Ottoman Empire under Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent had grown significantly in power and was seeking to consolidate control over the eastern Mediterranean. June 1522, Suleiman personally led a massive Ottoman force to Rhodes. The Ottoman army numbered approximately 100,000 troops, supported by a fleet of around 400 ships. Defenders, led by Grand Master Philippe Villiers de l'Isle-Adam, consisted of about 7,500 men, including approximately 600 knights. The siege lasted 6 months, characterized by intense fighting, extensive mining operations, and heavy bombardment. By December, the situation for defenders had become desperate. Numbers greatly reduced, supplies dwindling, and walls severely damaged. Recognizing the inevitability of defeat, Grand Master Villiers de l'Isle-Adam negotiated surrender terms with Suleiman. January 1st, 1523. Surviving knights, along with about 4,000 Rhodian Christians, departed the island, ending the Hospitallers' 213-year presence on Rhodes. Ottoman victory secured dominance in the eastern Mediterranean and forced Hospitallers to seek a new home. But this wasn't the end. It was transformation, because what happened next would create one of history's most famous victories and establish the Hospitallers as legends forever. After leaving Rhodes, Hospitallers spent 7 years without a permanent base, moving between Crete, Sicily, and Italy. Their situation changed in 1530 when Holy Roman Emperor Charles V granted them the Maltese archipelago, Malta, Gozo, and Comno, along with the North African port of Tripoli. In return, knights were required to pay annual tribute of a single Maltese falcon and defend Tripoli against Ottoman attacks. Yes, that Maltese falcon, the one from movies and books. It started here as real rent payment to the emperor. Knights initially viewed Malta as a poor substitute for Rhodes. The island was arid, had limited resources, and lacked adequate fortifications. When Grand Master Leal Adam first surveyed the new domain, he reportedly remarked, "Nothing but stones and scorpions, howling wind across barren landscape and constant crash of waves against rocky shores seemed to echo his disappointment." Nevertheless, they set about transforming it into a suitable headquarters. They established the capital at Birgu, later renamed Vittoriosa, and began constructing fortifications including Fort St. Angelo and Fort St. Elmo. Under Grand Master Jean Perisseau de Valette, elected in 1557, knights continued naval operations against Muslim shipping and coastal settlements. These activities, combined with Malta's strategic position, made the island a target for Ottoman expansion. Valette was an extraordinary leader who had survived the siege of Rhodes as a young knight. He understood that another Ottoman attack was inevitable and prepared accordingly. May 18, 1565. The Ottoman fleet appeared on the horizon. Nearly 200 ships carrying approximately 40,000 troops, including 6,000 elite janissaries. The first major Ottoman target was Fort St. Elmo, which guarded the entrance to Grand Harbor. The fort was subjected to around-the-clock bombardment from land and sea. Within days, its walls were reduced to rubble, but the defenders refused to surrender. After a month of constant assault, Fort St. Elmo finally fell. The cost had been enormous, approximately 8,000 Ottoman casualties, and nearly the entire garrison of 500 defenders. Only 9 knights survived, captured by the Ottomans. Mustafa Pasha, enraged by the losses and delay, ordered these knights executed. Their heads were placed on stakes and floated across Grand Harbor to demoralize the remaining defenders. The siege continued with unprecedented ferocity. Ottoman miners tunneled under the walls while defenders dug countermines to stop them. In the darkness beneath the earth, men fought with knives and fists in terrifying close combat. Above ground, the bombardment never ceased. The turning point came in early September when a small relief force from Sicily finally arrived, approximately 8,000 troops, far fewer than promised, but enough to boost morale. More importantly, disease was ravaging the Ottoman camp. Dysentery and fever spread through the crowded tents, killing thousands. Mustafa Pasha, seeing his army decimated by disease and determined resistance, made a final desperate assault on September 7th. The attack was massive. Nearly every remaining Ottoman soldier thrown against the walls. For hours, the battle hung in the balance. At one point, Ottoman troops actually breached the walls near the post of Castile, threatening to overwhelm the defenders. Grand Master Valette, now 71 years old, personally led the counterattack, fighting in the front line despite his age. "Today we decide the fate of Christendom," he shouted, rallying his men. "No retreat. No surrender." The fighting was hand-to-hand, brutal beyond imagination. Knights fought with swords broken from constant use, using shields and helmets as weapons when necessary. Maltese civilians, including women and children, joined the battle, throwing stones, boiling oil, and anything else they could find down upon the attackers. After hours of desperate combat, the Ottoman assault finally broke. Exhausted and decimated, the remaining troops retreated to their camp. On September 11th, the Ottoman fleet raised anchor and sailed away. The Great Siege of Malta had ended after 114 days of unimaginable horror and heroism. The cost had been devastating, approximately one-third of Malta's population killed, along with 249 knights. Ottoman casualties numbered between 20,000 and 30,000 men. The victory made the Knights Hospitaller legends throughout Europe. They had faced what seemed certain destruction and prevailed against impossible odds. But what of their brother order, the Templars? While the Hospitallers found new purpose and survived, the Templars walked a different path, a path that led to one of history's most shocking betrayals. Stop and think about this for a second. You're a Templar knight. You've spent your life fighting for Christianity. You've taken vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. You've built hospitals, protected pilgrims, created banking systems that benefit all of Europe. You're one of the most respected warriors in the world. Now, imagine waking up to armed soldiers smashing down your door, dragging you from your bed, chaining you like a common criminal, and accusing you of the most horrific crimes imaginable. This is exactly what happened on Friday, October 13th, 1307. The day that gave us the Friday the 13th superstition, the day the Templars learned that virtue means nothing when kings want your wealth. Dawn hadn't broken over Paris. In the royal palace, King Philip IV reviewed sealed orders one final time, thin lips curved in smile that never reached cold eyes. "Are all your men in position?" he asked Guillaume de Nogaret, his chief minister. "Every Templar preceptory in France will be surrounded before they wake." "Your Majesty," Nogaret confirmed. Operation begins simultaneously at dawn. As first light broke, silence of Templar houses across France shattered, with pounding of armored fists on doors and splintering wood as royal soldiers forced their way inside. In Paris Temple, Jacques de Molay, Grand Master of the Order, was dragged from his bed in nightclothes, his protests cut short by rough hands. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded Senior Templar Jean de Tours as soldiers ransacked the treasury. "You are arrested in name of the king on charges of heresy," announced the captain, unrolling a parchment. "You have denied Christ, spat upon the cross, and worshipped an idol called Baphomet." Tours' face drained of color. "These are lies, monstrous lies." In dungeons beneath the royal palace, interrogations began. Methods designed to break both body and spirit. The strappado, hoisting victims by the arms tied behind their backs, then dropping them with a sudden jerk, dislocating their shoulders, was a favorite technique. One veteran Templar, who had fought countless battles against Muslims, screamed as arms were wrenched from sockets for the third time. "Confess," urged the Inquisitor, a Dominican friar whose soft voice contrasted with the scene's brutality. "Admit you denied Christ upon initiation, and pain will stop." "I fought for Christ in Holy Land." The knight gasped through broken teeth, blood running down his chin. By the third day, he broke, as did hundreds of others. Confessions extracted through unimaginable suffering provided the justification Philip needed. Templar wealth, their true crime in the king's eyes, was now forfeit. What would you do? Choose between false confession and continued torture? This impossible choice faced hundreds of Templars, men who devoted lives to defending Christianity only to be branded heretics by the very institutions they served. Templar Jean de Tours later retracted his confession, declaring, "They tortured me so much I would have confessed to killing God himself." His retraction earned only more torture and eventually death at the stake. At the Council of Vienne in 1311, majority of church leaders voted against suppression, arguing evidence was insufficient. Nevertheless, under pressure from Philip IV, Pope Clement issued bull on March 22, 1312, officially dissolving the Knights Templar. This was followed by document transferring most Templar properties to Knights Hospitaller, though in practice Philip and other monarchs retained significant portions of wealth. But the final act was still to come, the most dramatic moment in medieval history. The scene that would echo through centuries and create one of history's most famous curses. March 18th, 1314. 7 years after arrests began, the crowd gathered on Ile de Juif in Paris to witness the final act of Templar tragedy. Jacques de Molay, held in prison for 7 years, and now an old man with flowing white beard. was led to pyre constructed on a small island in Seine. Given one last chance to confess and receive mercy, de Molay instead raised his voice so all could hear. "I confess that I am guilty of greatest iniquity, but that iniquity is that I have lied in admitting disgusting charges laid against order. I declare, and I must declare, that order is innocent, its purity and saintliness beyond question." As flames rose around him, de Molay's final words echoed across water. "Pope Clement, King Philip, within a year I summon you to meet me before the throne of God." The crowd watched in stunned silence as one of the most powerful men in Christianity was consumed by fire, defiant gaze fixed on the royal palace visible across Seine. Within a year, both Pope Clement and King Philip would indeed be dead, a coincidence that transformed the last Templar Grand Master's words into one of history's most famous curses. And so the two brother orders born in the blood-soaked streets of Jerusalem walked vastly different paths. One was destroyed in flames of betrayal and greed, their wealth seized, their members scattered or killed. The other adapted, transformed, and survived, moving from Jerusalem to Cyprus, to Rhodes, to Malta, evolving from warrior monks to humanitarian organization, yet never losing their core identity. Today, the Knights of Malta continue their mission of healing and service, while the Templars live on in legend and mystery, their story a cautionary tale about power, betrayal, and survival that continues to captivate us nearly 1,000 years later. You think you know about power? You know nothing. The real story of these two orders reveals how the world truly works, how institutions rise and fall, how virtue and corruption battle for supremacy, and how the choices made centuries ago continue to echo through time. The truth they tried to erase from history is not just about knights and kings. It's about the eternal struggle between light and darkness that shapes our world to this day. Thank you for watching this journey through the dramatic history of the Knights Templar and Knights Hospitaller. If you found this story fascinating, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more historical documentaries. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest content. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What aspect of these remarkable orders surprised you the most? Was it the Templars' innovative banking system, the Hospitallers' advanced medical care, or the dramatic contrast in their fates? Join us next time as we explore another chapter of history that continues to shape our world today.